Hello, my dear friends. I want to elaborate on something that I said last week, that Hamas is the new Amalek. And I want to explain that more fully today. This past Shabbos was Parsha Zohar. We always read Zohar before Purim because Zohar deals with Amalek, and Haman was a descendant of Agag, who was the king of Amalek. So Haman was an Amaleki, and therefore we read Zohar before Purim. The Parsha that we read, the Parsha of Zohar, has three mitzvos in the Parsha relating to Amalek. Zohar, Es Asher Asalacha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did? That they attacked the Jewish people who, unprovoked, when they were leaving Mitzrayim. Secondly, Lo Sishkach, you should not forget. You should remember and you should not forget. Those are two separate mitzvahs. And finally, there's a mitzvah, Machotim Chazecha Amalek. You should eradicate, annihilate Amalek, and remove their memory completely from the world. So the first two mitzvahs we fulfilled this past Shabbos. We remembered what Amalek did and we didn't forget. But what about the third mitzvah of annihilating Amalek? Amalek, is that still a relevant operative mitzvah? So you might say, well, there can't be a mitzvah to eradicate Amalek. There is no more Amalek. There's no Amaleki people that we know of. So how could there be a mitzvah? But it's clear from the Chumash that the mitzvah is, every generation is a mitzvah of Machotim Chazech Amalek, because the Chumash says, Melchama Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. There's a war between God and Amalek in every single generation. So it's obvious that in every generation there's Amalek and God is battling Amalek. So the question is, so what does that mean? How were there Amalekim in every generation? So there's two different approaches. One approach is to say Amalek are biological descendants of the original Amalek, who was the grandson of Esav. So we don't know who they are, but God does, and therefore God is able to fight against Amalek in every generation. And the descendants it's presumably is because the descendants of Amalek have the same terrible negative character traits as Amalek, and therefore God is battling against Amalek in every generation. If we had Nevi'im, if we had prophets, we would be able to annihilate Amalek ourselves. But the other approach is that of Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, who said in the name of his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, and other people say this as well, that Amalek is not so much a descendant. The Amalek today is not a descendant of the ancient Amalek, but Amalek is are people who live by the value system of Amalek. Amalek is evil in the extreme. Amalek is evil for the sake of evil and no other purpose. Amalek is cruelty and sadistic behavior and a desire to annihilate and destroy the Jewish people. So even if the person is not a descendant of Amalek, but if they display Amaleki behavior, then they are today's Amalekim. So throughout Jewish history, there were different Amalekim that came on the scene. God is doing a battle. God battles Amalek in every generation. Every generation, different types of Amalek. So the Amalekim of the Crusaders, of the Spanish Inquisition, the Nazis, and in our own times, the Amalekim are terrorists. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran belongs in the same boat as well. So these are the current day Amalekim. So in particular, Hamas, which is the probably today is the strongest terrorist organization. I'm not sure, maybe Hezbollah, but Hamas certainly is a large. As much as Israel keeps on taking out members of Hamas, they keep on replenishing their troops. So Hamas is a modern day manifestation of Amalek, according to the second pshat. The Rabbi Yoshe Ber brings a raya to his position, because the Rambam says that there's no longer a mitzvah to destroy the 7 nations who are living in Israel. There was in Canaan, because Kvar Avad Zichram, because they're already lost. We don't have those nations anymore. But the Rambam doesn't say that about Amalek. He says there's a mitzvah to destroy Amalek. So you see, it's a current mitzvah, even though we don't know who Amalek is. In any event, I think that there are very interesting parallels between Amalek and Hamas. First, the Chumash says that when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, it was B'derech B'tzeischem, in the Parsha of Amalek, B'derech B'tzeischem Mitzrayim. When you left Mitzrayim, V'ato ayefigei, and you were tired and exhausted. Why does the Torah tell us that? Because oftentimes there are many warlike nations, they're motivated by some desire. They want power. They want the domination. They want territory, or they're doing it for self-protection. Amalek attacked the Jewish people for none of those reasons. Amalek attacked Mitzrayim. You were leaving Mitzrayim. You had no land of your own. You were not a danger to anybody. You were tired and exhausted. So why did they attack? It was for no other reason than because of baseless hatred. And Hamas is exactly the same way. Hamas and terrorist organizations in general, they're not attacking because they think that they will overthrow the Israeli government. Hamas did not present, even at this October 7th, with their worst attack, they didn't present, it wasn't an existential threat for the state of Israel. Why did they attack? Because of pure hatred. They wanted to inflict as much pain and suffering as possible. And that is one parallel between Hamas and Amalek. Secondly, the Chumash says, the Amalek attacked the people who were Nechashalim. Nechashalim either means the stragglers, or it means the people who were, or Rashi says it means Chasei Karach, the people that are weak. Amalek is not a powerful nation. They're cowards, because who do they attack? They attack the people that are most vulnerable. They attack the people that are weak, and that's precisely what terrorism is, and especially Hamas. They don't attack the Israeli army. They don't do direct combat with the Israeli army. They plant bombs, and they innocent people who are not even members of the armed forces, and children and babies who are totally defenseless. That's who they attack, and that's a second quality of Amalek, that they pretend to be powerful, but really they're weaklings. They're cowards. We saw the terrible display of arrogance, Hamas, when they had the babies. Hashem Yimkom Dama in boxes as they were returning them to Israel, and they made a whole spectacle out of it, and they had music and hundreds of people gathered together to celebrate it, as if there was something to be proud of, that they had babies in boxes, dead babies in boxes. Unbelievable. That's the mentality of Amalek. They are cowards and weaklings who they attack the people that are weak and stragglers, that are easy to overcome. And I should mention that Haman was the same way. Haman wanted, the Jewish people were not a strong people. They were spread out among the territory of Achashverosh, and they didn't have armed forces. They didn't have their own army. And Haman wanted to murder every single one, the Tafet Nashim, even the children and the women folk and the elderly, because that's Amalek attacks those who are most vulnerable. A third interesting point is that the Chumash says Amalek Yoshe b'Negev in Bamidbar. Amalek dwelled in the Negev. Where is Hamas? In the Negev. Gaza is in the Negev. It's near the Negev. It's in the southern. Negev is another way. It means the south. So Hamas is in the southern part of Israel. So you see that Hamas there's another parallel to Amalek that Hamas has. Another point is Amalek took hostages. There's a pasuk in Bamidbar. Vayishma Aktani Melech Arad Yoshev HaNegev. Vayesh Mimenu Shevi. The king of Arad, who was sitting in the Negev, heard that the Jews were coming, and he went and he attacked them, and he took a hostage. Rashi says only one hostage, but he took a hostage from the Jewish people. Rashi says that Melech Arad was an Amaleki. He was Amalek. They were pretending to be Canaanites, but they were really Amalekim. So you already in the Chumash we see that Amalek, that's their modus operandi, to take hostages, because they know that how much pain that will cause the Jewish people. We've seen the unbelievable suffering of Klal Yisrael worldwide because of the hostage situation, and that's why Hamas took hostages, because, or maybe partially as a bargaining chip, but also because they knew how sensitive we are to the plight of our brothers and sisters. And that was their way of inflicting as much pain as possible. The word Hamas in Hebrew, Hamas is in Hebrew, it's Hamas with a ches. Hamas means to steal, to rob by force, and that's exactly what Hamas did. They robbed babies from the cradle. They buy people from their houses. They are thieves and ganovim of human beings, and that's it's reflected in their very name, which is a badge of dishonor. Hamas, they steal from the Jewish people. So how do we fulfill on our end the mitzvah of Machal Timcha? Purim is a time when if there's a focus on Amalek and Esther, Mordechai and Esther are able to overcome Amalek. So in our day and age also on Purim, it gives us an opportunity to religiously perform mitzvos that will strengthen the hand of God, so to speak. That God empowers the Rebbeinu Shalom. I mean, Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need us to empower him, but when we do things on Purim in a certain way, so that motivates HaKadosh Baruch Hu to destroy Amalek. What can we do on Purim to be so that there was a destruction of Amalek? Haman and his 10 sons were hung, and Amalek was destroyed in the time of Mordechai and Esther, on the 2 days of Purim. What could we do on Purim to affect the same thing, that we're besieged by Hamas and by Amalek and all the enemies of the Jewish people, who are also all part of the group of Amalek. So what could we do that will empower the Rebbeinu Shalom to take revenge against Hamas and Amalek? So first, Rashi says in the Chumash in Shemos that Vayovo Amalek. Rashi says that Amalek came right after the Jewish people said, "Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu u'mayim." When the Jews said, "We don't know if God is in our midst," that's when Amalek attacks. So Rashi gives a mashal. He says it's like a father is carrying his son, and whatever the son's on his shoulders, and whatever the son sees, he says, "Pick up. Could you pick this up for me?" And the father picks it up because he pick up that, and then finally the son sees somebody walking by, and he says, "Risa Misaba, did you see my father?" And the father becomes infuriated, and he says, "I gave you everything, and you asked, did you see my father?" So Klal Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them the man, and they gave them the be'er, and all the things and they took them out of Mitzrayim, and yet they expressed Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu u'mayim. We're not certain if God is in our midst. So when our emunah is weak, that's when Amalek attacks. That because Amalek thrives on lack of emunah. Amalek themselves, they're not afraid of God. They had no fear of them. The Mefarshim explained, because even though when all the nations were petrified of the Jewish people, it says in the Oz Yasher, when the sea split, everybody knew about Yitzias Mitzrayim, but not Amalek. Amalek was not afraid. God, as far as Amalek is concerned, that doesn't exist, and everything is just happenstance. So when when our emunah is weak, that's when Amalek has a stronghold. But particularly on Purim, if we'll strengthen our emunah, if we recognize the important theme of the Megillah is that even things that seem to be happenstance, and it seems it's just coincidence, and it's just things that are natural, everyday occurrences, but in the end, we saw how everything was being manipulated behind the scenes orchestrated behind the scenes by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if we will strengthen our sense of emunah, which is the message of the Megillah. God's name doesn't even appear in the Megillah, because it was a period of Hester Panim, of God being hidden. The Gemara says Esther, the name Esther reflects that there was Hester, that God was hidden. But it became, God was revealed in the end to the Jewish people, and they saw that all the things that had transpired were being orchestrated by Kadosh Baruch Hu. So if we will strengthen our sense of emunah on Purim, and not only on Purim, but going forward as well, and we'll realize that even though things might look dire, things might look despondent and terrible, and there's no solution. That's the Jews in Shushan. They thought there was no way out of it. But if we'll strengthen our emunah, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will eradicate the forces of evil in the world, the forces of Amalek. And it's unbelievable. Even though I said that the Hamas is Amalek, but there's so many members of the tribe throughout the world. The amount of anti-Semitism that we've seen the past year since October 7th is just beyond belief. And if we have emunah, if we intensify our emunah, we go to the opposite extreme of Amalek. Amalek is lo yer Elohim. If we recognize that every single thing that happens, if we scratch our finger, it's all hashgacha pratis. There's nothing that happens without the will of Hashem. So then that will weaken Amalek and hopefully lead to their eradication. And secondly, Amalek is evil to the nth degree. You know, there's a concept of lishma in Jewish life, that if you do a mitzvah, you're supposed to do lishma. It means for its own sake, without any ulterior motives. There's lishma in mitzvahs and there's lishma in averos. Amalek is everything they did against the Jewish people was lishma. Lishma in the sense that for no other reason. They had no, as I mentioned before, they had nothing to gain. There was no threat from the Jewish people, and they had no territory. They did it purely lishma, purely for its own sake, because they wanted to cause pain and harm and suffering to the Jewish people. And Hamas is exactly the same way. When on October 7th, they were not satisfied to murder, but they murdered parents in front of their children in front of their parents, and then they raped the women in front of the spouses and their parents. For what purpose? For no other purpose than to cause as much suffering as possible. So we need to go to the opposite extreme. We need to do chesed to the opposite extreme, without any ulterior motives, without any side benefits. Do chesed as much as we can. There's perhaps the two mitzvahs of Purim, of Matanas Levyonim and Mishloach Manos, are for that reason, that in order to overcome the forces of Amalek in the world, we have to demonstrate chesed. So there's chesed, which is based on compassion. Haman had zero compassion. Haman was going to eradicate millions of people. He didn't care about any one of them. So we show the intense concern we have for every individual. We give tzedakah as much as possible. But chesed tzedakah is a response to a need. So we feel bad, so we give tzedakah. But there's even a higher level, and that is where a person is motivated because the person, I want to do chesed, I want to be so good on other people. The Ribbon Shalom is in the daven we daven for avos chesed, that we should love chesed because the Ribbon Shalom loves chesed. Why did the Ribbon Shalom create the world? He not for any benefit of his own, because he wanted to bestow his love on people. So that's what we have to demonstrate on Purim as well. By giving Matanas Levyonim as generously as possible, and Mishloach Manos, to show, here, I brought you a gift. Why? Just because I love you. Just because you're so special. Just because you're such an important person in my life. And if we do it for that reason, if we show chesed, lishma, and so that's the antidote for the evil of Amalek and the evil of Hamas. They do their evil lishma. We have to do our chesed, our kindness, graciously lishma. And in that way, let us hope that we will see it should be fulfilled. The Machal Timcha Zech Amalek, and all the people with all its tentacles, all the people that are part of the Amaleki nation today. That let us hope that in Mirz Hashem they will be eradicated and destroyed, and we'll see the hostages should be able to, all the hostages should come out alive as quickly as possible, and the Ribbon Shalom should bring salvation for all of Klal Yisrael. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Yom Tov.